What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Gamecite Chronicles, the console gaming podcast where we sit down each and every week to talk about video games. I'm your host, Bonfire, and this is episode number 7. 7 episodes in, feeling good, and there is no short of topics to talk about. Now, I hope you're all having a good week out there, enjoying the sunshine. As like I said, spring is upon us. And it's awesome. I love this time of year. It's just so good. Even though it's been a chaotic and crazy week in the gaming industry. Some big news, some big announcements. We're going to cover a couple of those. And I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about this because it kind of dives into some topics that I've been kind of wanting to touch on. Just haven't really had the time to full on research them yet. But we're going to scratch the surface on this. So I'm really excited. I think we got a good show today. Now, for the uninitiated, remember, the best way you can support the show, and it's always appreciated, is to drop a comment, like the video, leave us a rating on the podcast services. It really helps with all the algorithms and all that stuff out there. And it really does help out the show. So I'd really appreciate if you guys could do that. So smash the like, drop a comment, leave us a rating. That helps out a bunch. And then also don't forget to join us over on Locals. That's locals.com. You can go to the gamesitechronicles.locals.com to head over there, join the community. I'd love to talk to you guys over there and kind of get something cultivating in that space. And then lastly, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Gamecite Podcast, where you can get feeds of the show. Sometimes we post clips, and I always love to share some thoughts out in the Twitterverse as it relates to video games. Now, a good friend of the show dropped some comment on the Halo show last week. He left us a comment in the last episode when we talked a little bit about the Halo TV series. And it's Rob. So Rob, shout out to you. Appreciate you, man. He says, I watched the first episode and it came across strongly as a Mandalorian knockoff. Has some good elements, so we'll continue watching. And that's interesting because that's not the first time I've heard this comparison between the Halo TV series and Mandalorian. And so, again, I haven't watched it yet. I know it's 2 episodes out now. I'm going to wait for a couple more before I redeem that Xbox free Paramount Plus kind of trial so I can consume more than just, a couple weeks of episodes and really try to get as much of that as possible. I don't know how many episodes are in the first season or not, but I do want to try to, assuming it's at least tolerable, despite what's kind of gone around, I want to check it out. So it's interesting though, you make that comment, and I'm kind of curious because it seems like the Halo TV series that debuted, I know it was a huge success in terms of, viewers, for Paramount Plus, and so it seems to be drawing some folks in, which doesn't surprise me too much. I mean, Halo is huge, but it's a funny comparison, and so I'm curious to see if it pays off for them. But it seems like it's more of like a budget Mandalorian kind of knockoff tone that they're putting out there. So we'll see. But glad to see that you at least maybe enjoyed it a little bit, and you're going to continue to check it out. So look forward to hearing more of those thoughts. And as always, I appreciate you leaving a comment and your support, Rob. Thank you so much. Now, before we get anything else, there was one bit of news. It's rather small, depending on your perspective on that I did want to just very briefly touch on, and that is E3 2022 is officially canceled. That's right, you heard me. E3 22 is officially canceled. And to me, this isn't too surprising. I think a lot of folks have seen the writing on the wall that E3 is dying. And I think for many years, a lot of content creators, a lot of folks in general were kind of talking about how E3 was just kind of still hanging around and slowly dying. And E3 is really interesting, man, because I didn't really religiously watch it until really kind of the Xbox One, PS4 era, but I always kind of tuned in occasionally when I could. And I just remember that time of the year, that June time frame, just being bonkers in the gaming world. And so in one way, it's kind of sad to see it go, because I'm pretty sure, I think E3 is done. I know due to COVID, they had talked about not doing an in-person event this year, I think with Omicron kind of spreading around, and then moving to a digital event like they did last year, when they did it last year. But now even that digital event is now canceled, and I think that's the nail in the coffin, ladies and gentlemen. I think that'll do it for E3. I don't think we're ever going to see it come back to the prominence it was, because it was a big thing. In, I think in thinking back about E3, again, I didn't really religiously watch it until 2013ish, but when G4 was around, and not to get too into G4, but that was kind of my access into E3 when I was younger, and kind of getting some reporting that way. But E3 was a special time for all its ups and downs. It definitely was an exciting time for gaming, and I will say I am sad to move away from it, just for the sense that it was kind of nice to have all of these big announcements and all this hype in a very confined window, like to really to 1 week. Because now what you've seen really since COVID and the shift away from E3 is all these developers and publishers just kind of hold their own showcases, and you just get so, like, I know Jeff Keighley's got his Summer Games Fest, and then you've got, Ubisoft does a thing, and then Nintendo does their thing, PlayStation does their thing, Xbox sometimes does their thing, and you get everyone just kind of doing their own thing, and it's just like so much to keep track of, and it's just all over the place. And sometimes these aren't put together very well. They're very long, they're boring, it's drawn out content, and it's content for the sake of content. And it's like, really, all you got to do is like drop a trailer, maybe show a demo, and you can do an interview with the devs afterwards to talk a little bit about the game. And that's all you need. We don't need like 1 to 2 hours of just blah. So I'm not stoked we're kind of moving in that direction, but I do think some of them do it right. Like, I think Sony's State of Play, I think they found a good cadence with that. Nintendo obviously has been killing it with the Direct and all that stuff. So yeah, an end of an era. E3 is officially gone, and I don't think we'll ever see it back. So with this announcement, though, that brings up the question of the week. Question of the week I have for you guys is, what was your favorite E3 moment throughout all of E3? What was your favorite? What's the moment that sticks out to you? And I was kind of thinking about this because, again, I don't remember some of the early days, like the Wii and like the PS3 and, some of the Xbox, some of that stuff, and some of those showcases, because I know there are definitely some standout moments. But I do think 2 moments kind of stand out to me that what I would classify as like a favorite E3 moment. I think the first thing that comes to mind is when the PS4 was debuted in 2013 alongside Xbox, that E3, when the Sony was just talking about showing you how easy it was to share their games. And it turned into a meme. It was just like this 1-2 punch, like coming right after Microsoft and their kind of fumbling of the Xbox One reveal. It was just perfect. It was absolutely perfect. And that's a really memorable moment for me. And then the other one that I slightly remember, but I just remember being in awe, was watching the Modern Warfare 2 demo. When they first debuted that game, watching the demo, it was the snow, that kind of one of the first snow level where you open up and you're jumping across the cliffs and kind of climbing and stuff like that. That was just incredible to me. I just remember being just jaw dropped and like, this looks amazing. And yeah, that just, I don't know, that moment sticks out to me. That demo, I remember watching it. I think it was during like the Xbox press conference or something like that, but that one really sticks out to me. But let me know what your favorite E3 moment was down in the comments below. Now this week, I think, like I said, we got a good show and a couple of topics to talk about, but the main meat and potatoes of this week's episode is the big PlayStation news with the new PlayStation Plus. So we're going to talk about that. I'll give a brief overview. We'll dive into it, share my thoughts, and inevitably compare it to Game Pass. But before we get into that and the games that we're playing, there were 2 other news items that I wanted to cover and briefly discuss. And the first of those is Breath of the Wild 2. So Zelda Breath of the Wild 2, Nintendo came out and delayed it. And they put out like a 3 or so minute video of, I forget his name, but the lead guy, one of the game directors, I think, for Zelda, came out and said, we're delaying it. I know we had originally promised that the game would, we're on track for 2022, but we're doing a delay and we're now shooting for spring 2023. And I think a lot of folks were disappointed in that. I know a lot of folks were dead set on this 2022 release date. And yeah, so moving out to spring 2023, I think that's a good move. And really, in almost all instances, a delay is not a bad thing. We can wait longer for this game. We've waited quite, already 5 years for this game. That's okay. And Breath of the Wild 2, the first Breath of the Wild took a while to make too. And that went through many delays as well. So I got to be honest, I'm not too surprised, but I'm also not like heartbroken or anything. Like take your time. Like that's an important game. And I don't think whether you like Breath of the Wild or not, I don't think you can take away from its importance in kind of how big that game is. It's huge. I mean, I pulled some numbers here. Breath of the Wild has sold approximately 25.8 million copies. And that is the highest selling Zelda game. For context, the next highest selling game is the Twilight Princess at 7.26 million. So this game was 3.5 times more sold than the next highest Zelda game. That's insane. That's absolutely insane. And then to compare it to all Switch games, it's the fourth best-selling Switch game behind Mario Kart, which is number 1, Animal Crossing, which is number 2, and Smash Bros. Ultimate at number 3. So that's pretty good. That's in some of these numbers, like Mario Kart, Animal Crossing, like these are just insane numbers. Like especially for Mario Kart 8, that's the Wii U game. Like it's wild, just absolutely wild. But Breath of the Wild is huge, and I have fond memories of this game. I played through it. I got it day one with my Switch, and it's one of the few games that totally encaptured me because I could not put it down. I remember spending my weekends, and luckily didn't really have much to do, and this was before I had my son, so I could do and get away with this. But I just remember just all day, like just playing Zelda, and I could not stop. And so few games capture me this way to where I can't stop playing. And even when I'm not playing, it's all I'm thinking about is like whatever I want to, what I want to do next, what am I going to tackle next? And I loved that game. It was so fun. And it's almost to the point where I don't think I ever want to play through it again because I just have such a fond and memorable experience with my first time playing it that I'm good. It's an amazing game. And I don't think you can understate its influence on other games. I mean, we see it even with Horizon Forbidden West, the parachute thing. I know Zelda's probably not the first game to kind of do this parachute mechanic, but it really popularized it. Horizon Forbidden West kind of took that. I think some of the climbing elements you see, and then you see a lot of other games copy that kind of opening iconic shot with Link kind of standing on the mountain overlooking kind of the entire open world. And you see quite a few other games mimic that imagery. And so this was a huge game and hugely influential game. So for me, like take your time, guys. You got a lot to live up to, doing a successor to this. And I'm good waiting. I can wait, especially with we've only been through the first quarter of 2022, and we've had so many games come out and high quality games come out. And I think arguably maybe 2 or 3 game of the year contenders, maybe 3, even 4 game of the year contenders already. And I saw someone point out on Twitter in response to this delay that now, with Breath of the Wild being delayed out of 2022, doesn't have to worry about competing with Elden Ring for game of the year. And, fair point. Again, I haven't played Elden Ring yet, but I plan on it. And so it's now got its wide open, and there's some hot competition this year, and we still have a lot of time left for other games to come out, especially in the holiday season. So yeah, it's been a monster 2022 so far. So Breath of the Wild 2 delayed. I'm not super concerned about it. But the other thing that was interesting, they did show a couple of brief clips of game footage, most of which we'd seen, but the moment that everyone's kind of talking about is this shot where Link kind of pulls out the Master Sword and it's destroyed, or, just like half the Master Sword. And so it kind of begs the question, like, what's going on here? And I'm no Zelda lore purist or anything like that. I don't pretend to know everything, especially about the Breath of the Wild lore. It's been so long since I've played it. I don't remember all of the details, but with this, I do think it's interesting. And, you know, I don't really have like a solid theory or anything, but I'm curious if more time has passed. Because remember from really the prequel game, Age of Calamity, which I haven't played, and I know that's got quite a bit of story in there. I'm not a big Muso game enthusiast, so it doesn't really speak to me, though I would like to try it. But I know that was the prequel, and between that and I think Breath of the Wild is there. I can't remember the exact time. For some reason, 100 years stands out, but I know there was many years between that game because Link kind of went into this like cryo sleep at the beginning of Breath of the Wild. And so I'm curious if something like that between the end of Breath of the Wild and now Breath of the Wild 2, an extended time of period has passed, and now we see, because they talk about you're going to be exploring Hyrule, but you're also going to exploring places in the sky, because some of the shots they show, they've got kind of these islands, these floating islands that you can kind of go to. And so I'm curious on that perspective. And then with the Master Sword, being destroyed, maybe after the battle and so much time has passed that the sword kind of just decayed or something. I don't know. I really don't know. I did see someone point out though that Link's hand almost looks like Ganon's hand. And I thought that was really interesting. And like maybe Ganon's hand or Ganon's starting to consume Link or something like that. And I love that theory. Like I would love just a darker story for Breath of the Wild 2, to where Ganon's like slowly taking over Link, and maybe you're fighting against a clock to kind of stop this. I don't know. I have no idea, but it sounds awesome. And I love the idea of just a more like a dark Zelda game, especially in this, with Breath of the Wild, in the way it plays and all that stuff. Like I love it. I absolutely love it. But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about the Master Sword. Let me know if you have any good theories out there. I'd love to hear them, because some people get super into that stuff and some are right. So I'm just kind of curious. Let me know down in the comments below. And the next news story I wanted to touch on, a rather small one, but I wanted to bring it up because I'm a fan. And that is that this past week, Sony filed a new trademark for Knack. Knack the game. For those of you who remember, the first Knack came out alongside the PlayStation 4 back in 2013, I think it was. And then the sequel, Knack 2, came out in 2017. And I don't know what it is about these games. Like, I feel like I'm the only fan of these games. Like, everyone seems to kind of make fun of them. They're kids' games or whatever. But I loved them. I loved the first Knack. And actually, funny enough, coincidentally, I have a full playthrough of the first Knack on my YouTube channel when I was kind of dabbling in the Let's Play space. So if you ever want to go back and find those old videos of a younger Bonfire, you can certainly do so. It exists out there. But I thought the first Knack was awesome. And Knack 2 was also great. I genuinely think these are great games. Like I love the art design, this kind of almost Pixar animation style. I think they have good stories. I think the gameplay is really fun. Platforming, doing some combat. There's some interesting mechanics that are kind of thrown in. Even a little bit of stealth elements, fun enemies. I think it's all good. I don't know. I don't know why people don't like Knack. I think these are awesome games. I would love to see another sequel. And so I don't know that this trademark means that there's another, like a third game in the works. Because, I mean, companies do this stuff all the time with trademarks, usually just to kind of protect their properties. But who knows? Maybe they're prepping up for another Knack game. I would love it. Now, one thing to note is Japan Studio originally developed the Knack games, and they've been disbanded. If you remember that, they've kind of been disbanded. I think someone over to Team Asobi. Team Asobi is kind of the new Japan Studio, if you will, at least the way I kind of understand it. But since Japan Studio is no more, that kind of leaves the question, like, who, if there was a Knack 3 game in development, who would be making it between all of Sony's first parties? And I got to be honest, I don't have an answer to that. I don't know. And really, the only team that I think is certainly capable and kind of makes sense to do it, though I don't think they are, is Team Asobi. Because they're the ones that brought us that Astrobots Playroom, the free kind of PlayStation 5 game, which, by the way, don't overlook that. If you have a PS5 or you're going to get a PS5, it's free. play it. It's well worth your time. It is genuinely a fun game and a fairly easy platinum if you're a trophy hunter out there. But for what they did in that game, I think would translate well into a Knack game. You know, the platforming, some of the combat, and all of that stuff. I genuinely think they would be a great fit for that. But I have to imagine they're making like either a full-fledged Astrobot game in the vein of Astrobot's Playroom, or another kind of VR venture for PSVR 2 around Astrobots. But either way, it got me excited, and I wanted it. Any chance I get to talk about Knack, I love it because, like I said, I feel like I'm the only fan out there that liked the Knack games. But who knows? If you're a Knack fan out there, drop a like on the video or the podcast. Leave us a good rating because we Knack fans have to stay together. You know what I mean? And so with that leads us into what games have I been playing? 20 or so minutes into the show. But really, man, I've just been playing Returnal. I gotta be honest, I've just been playing Returnal. This game has recaptured me in a way I didn't think possible. But I am absolutely loving it. And while I haven't tried the Ascension Tower yet, I'm trophy hunting. I gotta be honest. I'm 3 trophies away from the platinum. And I finally got the chapter 3 secret ending. I got through that. I was able to find all the I think the sunshine fragments. There's one in each biome. And then you kind of got to beat the last boss again. And then you unlock the secret ending. And it was good. I don't pretend to understand this kind of vaguely told story that they've got going on with Returnal, but I find it absolutely fascinating. And I know there's more story elements in the Ascension Tower, which I plan to get to once I get this platinum. I'm like so close. I'm just bound and determined to do it. The only thing I have left is like there's I think 3 biomes I have to finish surveys on, 2 of which I just need like 1 glyph that I need to find. But Returnal, man, it's so good. Like it is genuinely a great game, and I loved it when it came out, albeit I know it had its problems. And it's certainly not going to be a game for everyone because it's difficult. They're long runs compared to other roguelikes, but the gameplay is phenomenal, and it's just got that Housemarque just touch to it. It's got that I don't know how to describe it. I can't think of the right word right now, but it's definitely a Housemarque game, and it's just addictive. It's arcadey. It's fun, and so good. And one thing I forgot to mention last week, because I did have to replay most of the bosses to unlock those trophies, because it didn't unlock my first playthrough. But the 4th biome boss that you play, and if you've gotten this far, you know what I'm talking about. But it's the boss who plays the organ when you kind of get up to him. Is such an epic boss fight. Like I love that is my favorite boss fight of that game, and probably one of my favorite boss battles of any video games. It'd probably be in my top 25 that I could think of. It's good. I love it because when you get to that section, you kind of have to climb up the level to go towards the top where he is. But when you get to that section, you can vaguely hear organ music playing, and it sounds badass. So it kind of sets that ambiance. But then as you get closer and closer, the music gets louder and louder, and it's just like this great buildup to the boss battle. And then once you get there, it's just all out, and you're a typical Returnal boss battle. And I love it. I love that he's playing his organs. I love the music. I love the atmosphere. It's so good. I really, really loved it. It's awesome. It's tense. It's fun. It's so good. So good. And the last thing I want to mention about Returnal is, while I haven't done the Ascension Tower yet, mention that, I have been watching some streams of people doing the Ascension Tower. Like one guy was super far in the tower. And I gotta say, it looks insane. It just looks absolutely insane. And I'm excited to try it out, but I have to clean up these trophies. I'm just bound and determined to get this platinum, because it's I guess it's a pride thing at this point, because I've put so much time into this game. And I definitely want to get back to Horizon and finish this knockout Horizon, so that way I can kind of clean the slate open it up for Elden Ring. I've been playing through these games slow, and you've been bearing with me over the weeks while I talk about them, but sometimes it's just how life goes, That's just how it goes. And now I want to get into the meat and potatoes of the show. Let's talk about the PlayStation and the new PlayStation Plus announcement. And so how I want to cover this is I want to start with a little bit of overview of what they announced, share some thoughts on that, and then share some of my initial reactions to the announcement, and then the inevitable comparison to Game Pass, because that's what everyone's talking about. Is this PlayStation Plus the Game Pass killer? So we'll tread on that question a little bit. And there's a couple, I think this will start to cover in, one of the topics I've wanted to do, but again, as I mentioned, I just haven't had enough time to where I feel comfortable and have done some thorough research on it. But I think we're going to kind of scratch the surface about Game Pass. And what I want to touch on is its impact on the industry. And I think through this action and some of the topics that we'll touch on as we go through this, we'll start to shed some light on that. So, new PlayStation Plus. Essentially, so what it is it basically combines PlayStation Plus and PlayStation Now. I mean, ultimately, that's kind of what's happening, at least with the announcement. Now, there's 3 tiers to the new PlayStation Plus that launches, I think, what they say in June, I believe it is. And the first is PS Plus Essential, which is basically PS Plus as you know it today. So you get monthly PS5, PS4 games, they're downloadable. You also get exclusive discounts to some games in the store when they do promotions, cloud storage, which is great for storing your saves, and then online multiplayer access. So PS Plus, as you know it today, is the essential tier. And then they have PS Plus Extra, which gives you all the aforementioned, but then you also get a downloadable catalog of nearly 400 PS5 and PS4 games. That's a lot. That's a lot of games. And some of those games that they said would be in the lineup are games like Death Stranding, God of War, Marvel's Spider-Man, Miles Morales, Mortal Kombat 11, and Returnal. So you get to try out Returnal if you haven't already picked that game up on a PS5. Which I highly I recommend trying it and going in with an open mind, because it's not going to be for everyone, but I do think it's a phenomenal game. And so the highest tier is PS Plus Premium, which gives you all of the aforementioned we just covered, but you also get streaming for PS3 games, PS1, PS2, and PSP game catalog for both download and streaming, and then time-limited game trials, which is really interesting. Very, very interesting there. So I'm kind of curious if that's time-limited game trials for like new releases or a small subset of games. I guess we'll find out, because they didn't really give us a ton of details. They kind of just laid out, here's the plans, but not a ton of details. And that's, like the library of games, because the PS1, PS2, and PSP games is, I think they said, approximately 340 games. So, over 700 games total if you're a PS Plus Premium member. So a lot of games, but we don't know what they are. So that's essentially the service. Let me get to the prices here. Let me pull that up real quick. So we talk about pricing. The PS Plus Essential, so PS Plus as you know it today, is either $9.99 a month, US dollars, or $59.99 for the year, which I think is exactly what it is today. So no change. And a lot of times you can buy an annual membership at a discounted price, especially around Black Friday time. That's the way to do it. And then the PS Plus Extra is $14.99 a month or $100 a year. And then the premium tier, so the top tier, is either $17 or $18 essentially a month or $120 a year. So definitely the year is the way to go if you're going to do that. And if you do it for a year, it's $10 a month at $120 a year. So not bad. So my reaction to that, in reading it, kind of looking into it, my first reaction is pretty meh. Like meh, pretty cool, but doesn't really entice me all that much. I'm a little underwhelmed, but not that I was expecting to be blown away by whatever the Project Spartacus service was. And to me, it's very much just kind of how I explained it, a consolidation of the two services, which I feel like is long overdue. I know PS Plus has been around for a long time, and then PlayStation Now I think is, I want to say it's got like 9 or 10 million subscribers, or maybe 11 million or something like that when I looked it up. So, not a ton when you compare it to PS Plus, but a fairly decent amount, and a pretty good service from what I've heard, albeit some of the game streaming I've heard is a little laggy and not the most optimal experience. You definitely want to download over streaming. But I just think kind of having these two separate services weren't really, spreads them a little too thin. So just consolidating them to me makes total sense. Total sense. I think it's long overdue for that. Bolster your offering with PS Plus. I think it's great branding. It's been around for a long time. You've got a great subscriber base. It's a no-brainer in my opinion. Like, it totally makes sense. And it's one of these things where, as it stands right now, I'll just keep my PS Plus, my basic package, and just roll with that. Because honestly, I think the monthly games that they've been offering, I think PlayStation has been killing it on that front, especially in the last 12 to 18 months. There've been some awesome games on there. Like Knockout City was on there, which I thought was a good offering. Plague Tale, I know they've done. I can't think of them, but I know there's been some really, really good games, and even a couple of them for PS5 that were brand new released. So new releases for PS5 that were offered on PS Plus. Obviously not like your top tier first party style of games, but still, I think some decent offerings. Like there was that one that's basically Among Us, but a different style of Among Us, but still that concept. I forget what that game was called that came out a few months ago on PS Plus, but some games like that. And so I know the PS Plus games are kind of hit and miss every month, depending on your taste. But I would say overall, for the value, it's a pretty good deal. And they've been killing it lately, at least in my opinion. My biggest thing on kind of why I'm not super excited is we don't know what these games are. So they said 400 PS4 and PS5 games. I think that's very exciting, and that's a lot of games. That's a ton of games. But I don't know what exactly it's going to be offered on there. I assume most of all the PS4 first parties, like your Uncharted, your Last of Us is, obviously God of War, we mentioned that. And maybe even a game that I like, the Order 1886. So, some of those games are first party games. I imagine they've got some talks with some third party developers and publishers to get some of those games on there. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what that catalog looks like, because that's a lot of games. And especially on the PS5 side, like, is it, you can offer because there's a decent amount of PS5 games, but there's not a ton. So, how many of those are you going to offer? Like, what's the PS5 to PS4 ratio within that 400 look like? I just have some questions around that before I start getting excited on it. I think there's two major things that kind of I'm disappointed in. The first is the streaming for PS3. It's clear they've yet to solve this backwards compatibility issue and allow for PS3 games to be downloaded and, either natively run or emulated on, modern hardware with the PS5. And based on this announcement, it seems like they've given up on this. And that's just so disappointing to me, because we've talked about it on a past episode about game preservation. And I mentioned this, that, there's so many great games on the PlayStation 3 that are stranded on the PlayStation 3. And if you don't have that game in a PS3, then you're not going to really be able to play that. And I'm kind of a purist when it comes to game preservation, because I want all games to be preserved and accessible. And it's funny because when I use that term, a lot of game journos on the websites and the Twitter warriors out there like to talk about gaming accessibility. And it kind of came back up with Elden Ring, but I like to talk about accessibility in this context, in that I think these games should be accessible. I like having more games accessible, meaning available to play and purchase a la carte to as many folks as possible. So I'm kind of a purist in that way, and I think it's important. Because, I don't know, I think about like some of the older games that I used to love and play. I'd love to be able to have access to those games and try them out and kind of maybe it's a nostalgia thing and kind of relive some of those childhood memories. But also, now that I have my son, I kind of think about when I start introducing to him to video games and gaming, being able to kind of show him some of the games I grew up on. And luckily, with Nintendo, I get to do that with some of those mini consoles in those libraries with the Nintendo and Super Nintendo. But there's still plenty of other games like on the PS1 and PS2 that I'm not necessarily going to get to share with him. And that's a bummer. It's kind of a bummer. Now, one thing I did just notice an article late yesterday from Video Games Chronicle talking about that Sony Interactive Entertainment could be working on bringing PlayStation 3 games to PS5 without the requirement to stream them over the internet. And so this is according to VentureBeat journalist Jeff Grubb, as they reported, who has sources that reportedly indicated that behind the scenes, Sony could be working on an emulation solution for PS3 on the PS5. So I guess I now have a little glimmer of hope, a little bit of hope that maybe they're still working on a solution. It's just they're just not ready yet. So this article states, and I quote, according to VentureBeat's Grubb, however, the service could eventually receive PS3 emulation similar to other retro systems it's set to support. And he says, since talking about all this week, I've asked, it sounds like Sony might be working on emulation for PS3 on PS5, he said. It may take some time. I wish they would just come out and tell us that. Tell us that they care about this stuff because that is what is missing from the PS Plus announcement. To me, it seemed like they didn't care about any of it. They just slapped it together, put a new name on it, and sold it. End quote. And that's exactly how I feel. That perfectly encapsulates that. And the fact that he has some source, some indication to believe that, hey, they're still trying to solve this problem is encouraging. But I agree with him 100%. Like, just come out and say it. But like, hey, we're trying to solve this problem. It's going to be, when the service launches, it's streaming, but we're working on emulation as a solution for the near-term future. Just come out and say it. Be straight. I would love that. And I actually think you would, I don't know if it would necessarily increase your sales, but I think it would increase customer goodwill and get people more interested in it. But I digress there. The other thing that's disappointing about this is Vita. No love for Vita in any of this announcement. So we've got PS1, PS2, PSP games, which I'm excited to see which kind of games fit in from the PSP are going to be in this library. PS3 streaming, PS4, PS5, no Vita. No love for the Vita. What the hell? Why? Why does Sony hate the Vita so much? Like, I'm not a Vita purist or a huge Vita enthusiast, but I have a Vita. I got one late in its life cycle, but it's freaking awesome. Are you kidding me? The Vita was way ahead of its time when it came out in, gosh, what was it, 2011? I mean, it is an amazing machine. If you really think about what it can do, it is an incredible machine. And I've even played PS4 games streaming to my Vita, which is awesome. Like, I think I did that for some of Persona 4 when I was playing that because it's perfect. It's perfect. Even if it's the latency, it's perfect. And the Vita's got some great games in that library. And again, when we talk about accessibility, game preservation, etc., and especially with the Vita shop closing, there's tons of great games on there that they're only going to be on the Vita and they're locked on the Vita. And those games seem like it should be fairly easy to bring over to, the PS4, PS5, but no love for the Vita. What the hell, Sony? Get your shit together. Just show some love to the Vita. Bring some of those great games that you have over to your service and celebrate it. God, I don't understand. Man. So, I mean, but yeah, those are the two things that can really stick out to me. Although maybe there's a solution for PS3, but still no love for the Vita. But now, Game Pass. That's what everyone's talking about. Is this the Game Pass killer? And everyone's making the comparisons to Game Pass. Everyone's talking about it. And really, when you compare the two, to compare the two tiers, I think, because Xbox Game Pass has really a two-tiered. You get the PC or Xbox version, which I think is $10 a month. And then you get Game Pass Ultimate, which offers you both for $15 a month. And so if you compare the top tier monthly to the top tier monthly on PS Plus, Game Pass is cheaper. However, most people likely will do the monthly option, which is $10 a month, $120 for the year, which is cheaper. So depending on how you go, one can be cheaper or more expensive than the other. So, but I think they're priced competitively when you compare the two. I think they're right in the ballpark. And I think each service offers some benefits. We talked about the PS Plus having obviously the catalog games. I think this PS Plus is going to have more when you talk about a total of 700 games, when Game Pass has, I think with EA Play, at least a couple hundred, 200 plus, I think is what it is. Definitely the Xbox Game Pass itself without EA Play, they always market it as 100 plus games, which is true. But I think with EA Play, because they've got a good chunk of games on there, I think they're approaching 200. And that's just a guess. I'm sure you can correct me if I'm wrong there. So seemingly more games from what we've seen, though we don't know the quality of them yet on the PlayStation Plus. Obviously, you get your discounts. I think both services offer some forms of discounts from time to time. Both of them, I think, have some form of game trials at some point. But the biggest difference between the two services, and the one that everyone's talking about, is day one. Day one games. We obviously know Game Pass, Xbox Game Pass, that's their bread and butter. Day one games, first party games out on Game Pass. So Sony has come out and said they're not doing that. And actually, Jim Ryan, the Sony PlayStation CEO, came out and said that stated they're putting their games on the service day one would hurt the quality. And again, that's kind of that. This is just fuel to the fire in the debate. Because when a lot of people talk about Game Pass, that's one of the main benefits. It's those day one releases, day and date on Game Pass. And, so that kind of begs the question, would putting your games day one on the service hurt the quality? And I've seen arguments on both sides. I see some people on the Xbox camp say, well, Xbox's output hasn't necessarily been hurt. That's fair. I mean, Forza Horizon, I think, was a splash. Halo Infinite, I think, had some goodwill to it, though it has its problems, but I think it was a fairly decent game. Psychonauts 2, I think, did pretty well, at least from a critic standpoint. But other than that, I mean, they've obviously had some third-party day one releases. I think of like Outriders, Rainbow Six Extraction, etc. But from first party, we haven't really seen a ton. And so I don't think we can yet answer that question on the Xbox camp if it's hurt their quality. I mean, they also had games like Crossfire X. That's, from what I've heard, trash. I think it has a Metacritic score of like 40. It's not good. So, and on the Xbox side, a lot of their first party games outside of a handful have been not that great, very underwhelming. So but again, we haven't seen the output, especially after the Bethesda acquisition and some of the things we know with all their studios. They got, Ninja Theory, etc. So we haven't necessarily seen kind of what this new huge first party from Xbox, what that lineup is capable of. I think it's still too early, but I don't know if I necessarily buy it. Now on the PlayStation side, what I saw the quote from Jim Ryan, and I thought it was really interesting. 1 second, let me find it here, and let's see. Okay, here it is. So Jim Ryan says, and I quote, "In terms of putting our own games into this service or any of our services upon their release, as you well know, this is not a road that we've gone down in the past," Ryan said. "And it's not a road we're going to go down with this new service. We feel if we're going to do that with the games that we make at PlayStation Studios, that virtuous cycle will be broken. The level of investment that we need to make in our studios would not be possible. And we think the knock-on effect on the quality of games that we make would not be something that gamers want." We feel we are in a good virtuous cycle with the studios, Ryan added, where the investment delivers success, which enables yet more investment, which delivers yet more success. We like that cycle, and we think our gamers like that cycle. End quote. And that's he says something there at the end that I think not a lot of people are talking about, but I think it's really important. Because if you read that quote, he mentions this cycle. At the end of it, that cycle, the importance of putting an investment in, releasing, getting more revenue, coming back. So you put revenue in, release the product, revenue comes back, a la that cycle. So that just that, and you kind of rinse and repeat that cycle. And it's very tried and true, very basic, very different from a subscription model, but it works. It works. And I think from his perspective, what he's saying is that if you don't have that revenue stream, that could impact the quality, meaning you don't have that kind of almost instant return, because through subscription services, you're kind of getting, as you get more subscribers, you just kind of this steady stream of income based on your subscriber count. And then kind of on the back end, and I'm just kind of thinking this through and how I would think it would work in my mind, is that when you get all this money, steady stream of income of money based on your subscriber count, that you then have to distribute across all your first party studios into, or, even second party studios to the games that you're funding. And does one equal the other? I don't have an answer to that, but I don't think so. And I think that's what he's seeing. And maybe they're just not ready for that. Now, I've seen some people, make the argument on the other end that they just can't afford it. And I think you're absolutely right. From the Xbox camp, yeah, Xbox can afford to do that. They have deep pockets. They have Microsoft pockets. Hello, Windows, Office, all that software over there. They got Teams now. So much stuff outside of gaming that just generates them buku bucks. Are you kidding me? It's disgusting how much money that company has. I mean, it's literally atrocious. So they have very, very deep pockets. So it's no big deal for them to lose money on these things. It's not a big deal because they can supplement that money elsewhere with other revenue streams, where Sony can do that, but not to that same degree, because they have Sony Pictures and obviously some of the other Sony hardware, laptops, cameras, stuff like that, but not to the same degree that Microsoft and Xbox can. And I think that's an important point that people need to consider. And I think, again, just trying to think this through, in actually a question on my favorite podcast that I listen to, Sacred Symbols, someone wrote in with this question that I think is a really good question and kind of brings up a good point and I don't know the answer to it, though I think I do. And his question goes something like this. And he was talking about when Microsoft bought Activision with that recent purchase. He says, he said something like, does Xbox expect to put out $60 worth of content, meaning a AAA game, for less than $60 a month in revenue? Because with all the studios that Xbox now has in their first party lineup, they could get to a point where they're cranking out a big AAA $60 style of game every month. And so do they expect to put out $60 worth of content for less than $60? And I don't know. This is the question that I have. I don't know if that all checks out. I guess is what I'm trying to say, that because I don't think so. I don't think it works out that way. I really don't. And even if the cost of the subscription service goes up, does that still outweigh the revenue from selling the game directly to the consumer rather than having it as part of a service? I don't know. And my take is I don't think so. And I think that's what Jim Ryan's hinting at, is that the cost of the service the revenue of the service isn't going to outweigh if we were just to sell the game straight up based on how things are going right now. Again, that's an important point to keep in mind. And so I think that's something to consider for folks, is that I don't think that this cycle works out in that favor. Now, one of the other things kind of along this topic, as I was doing some research for the show, I found this really interesting article on PC Gamer talking about Phil Spencer, and he reveals how developers earn money through Game Pass, because it kind of plays into this picture, and I was very curious. Now, one of the other things that I think is important to note is that Game Pass is not profitable. It's not there yet. And I think a lot of people either forget that or don't understand that. Because it was back in, I think it was November of last year, Phil Spencer was on the record stating that Game Pass is sustainable. And I quote, sustainable. He didn't say it was profitable. He says it's sustainable when he was asked about the Game Pass profitability directly. And I think that's an important point. From Xbox, we talked about how much money Microsoft has. Game Pass is sustainable because they can continue to feed money into this beast until it reaches its point. Where Sony's not in the position to do that. Xbox is. And I think that's why he says it's sustainable, not profitable. If it was profitable, he would straight up say that. But he didn't say that. He says it's sustainable. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And I think it's also fair to compare the service to the likes of Netflix. I think Netflix is kind of the model for a service model, if you will, for subscription services. And for many years, Netflix, because Netflix has been in business since the early 2000s, late 90s or something like that. I want to say 1987 is when it was founded, which I didn't even realize that. It blows my mind. But they've been in business for well over 20 years. And for many of those years, most of them, they were not profitable. They were sinking money into this and losing millions and millions of dollars every year. And Game Pass is kind of in the same boat, along those same lines. Now, that's not to say they won't ever reach a point where they are profitable. I'm sure there's certainly a crossing point to where they can become profitable with this service, but they're not there yet. And I think people forget about that. I really, really do. But on this article, when they talk about how developers make money from Game Pass, or how Xbox goes about buying games for Game Pass, Phil Spencer says, and I quote, "In certain cases, we'll pay for the full production cost of the game. Then they get all the retail opportunity on top of Game Pass. They can go sell it on PlayStation, on Steam, and on Xbox, and on Switch. Ellipses. Sometimes the developers more done with the game, and it's more of just a transaction of, hey, we'll put the game on Game Pass if you pay us this amount of money." He continues to go on and says, "Others want agreements more based on usage and monetization, whether it's a store monetization that gets created through transactions or usage. We're open to experimenting with many different partners because we don't think we've figured it out. When we started, we had a model that was all based on usage. Most of the partners said, yeah, we understand that, but we don't believe it, so just give us money up front." End quote. So it sounds like, and kind of how I figured it worked, is that in most cases, they just pay them some lump sum up front and put it on Game Pass for X period. And so this is a question, again, I don't think we have the answer to it, but is that upfront money from a developer standpoint, does that outweigh the cost or the revenue you could have gotten if you just sold the game straight up? Now, you can also make the argument that, yeah, these games are still on sale. Just because it's on Game Pass doesn't mean people can't go buy it. And you're right, especially when you talk about other platforms. You're absolutely right. But one of the interesting things when you talk to, I think a lot of Xbox gamers, they don't buy games. Some of them do, certainly. Certainly, there's tons of people that still buy Xbox games, but when anyone talks about Game Pass, it's all about, when anyone talks about Xbox, it's about Game Pass and the games that are on Game Pass. Now, I know Xbox has come out and said that Game Pass subscribers spend more and buy more games. Okay, I'd love to see that. I'd love to see the analysis, and I'd love to see that breakdown. Because at least from what I hear and what I see is that people aren't buying Xbox games. Like, how many of you out there bought Forza Horizon 5? I don't really know anyone that's bought in Forza Horizon 5. I know lots of people that have played it through Game Pass, myself included. I dabbled in that game, gave it a try, see what the hype's about. I didn't buy it. What about Halo? Anyone buy Halo Infinite? Anybody? Anybody out there? Who's buying Halo? I don't know. I want to buy Halo just to have the game, but I want to wait till it's like $20. You know? So maybe I'm also part of the problem because I'm not buying the games. But this bleeds into this kind of, I guess, theory that I have about Game Pass, in that I feel like Game Pass has changed consumer perception about video games and price. Because I've seen it in the comments and I see it online where a new game's coming out and people are asking, oh, is it on Game Pass? Or, oh, they'll make the comment, oh, I'll just wait till it's on Game Pass. Or you also see the other comments in that I'm not paying $60 for that. I'd rather just pay $10 a month and play it on Game Pass. And that right there is a statement that says I'm equating this, I'm diminishing the value of $60. I don't think the game's worth $60, but I think it's worth $10, even though it's the same game. Because, and it's not to say you shouldn't try to get discounts. I'm not saying you need to pay full price for video games or anything like that. No. That's not where I'm going with it. What I'm saying is you've already made the connection in devaluing that game all the way down to $10 or whatever it costs for the subscription service. And I think a lot of people are doing that and not realizing it. So I think Game Pass and the model that they've created and the impact they're already having on the industry has changed the consumer perception of the price of video games. People don't want to pay full price for games if they know they can pay it for $1 or $10 to subscribe for Game Pass for a month or two to play and access the game. And so with that leads me to ask the question that, okay, does that pricing model hurt developers? Does it hurt the games industry? And I don't know the answer to that yet. And I don't know we have a ton of evidence to really understand and know the answer to that. But that's kind of where my mind's at when we talk about Game Pass and how that's changed the industry. This move to subscription model, I think, is going to have wide ramifications on how we play games, how we consume games, and how games are developed. Because, and this is the last point I make before we wrap up the show, is that if you look at Netflix, and again, we'll go back to the Netflix comparison and look at all the shows that are on Netflix and how many shows, even in the last 12 months, that they've canceled. I mean, their strategy is fund all these shows, throw it up on the wall and see what sticks. If it doesn't stick to the wall, cancel, done. Get out of here. We don't want your business anymore. You know what I mean? That's what they do. You also have to weed through so much crap on Netflix, because there's a lot of just crap. There's a lot of content on Netflix, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of crap on Netflix to get to the good stuff, like The Ozarks, like Stranger Things, etc., to get on there. Will we see that in a subscription like service in video games with Game Pass even? I'd say if you look at Game Pass today, we already start to see that. Now, don't get me wrong. I think Game Pass is great value. I think there's a lot of great games on there if you haven't played them, especially some like the older Fallouts, some of the Gears games, the Halo games, etc. There's some really great games on Game Pass. But there's also a lot of, I hesitate to say crap, but there's a lot of, subpar games and games that, not a lot of people are going to be interested in. And that's also not to take away that Game Pass does offer the ability, like a free-to-play game or even like a game coming to PS Plus when it's for that month, the ability to get it into more hands. And so I think there's some benefits there. And if the game's monetized in a fairly appropriate manner, can gain revenue that way because it has more people playing it. But I don't know if that outweighs just selling your game straight up. I mean, let's look at Back 4 Blood as an example. I mean, Back 4 Blood, I think a lot of people were hyped for that. Left 4 Dead, it's kind of spiritual successor. I think it was a good move to get it on Game Pass, to be honest, get it in more people's hands. But that game kind of just came and went. And I don't know how those developers are doing. I don't know if the price the money that they got for putting it on Game Pass day one has paid out. I really don't. I really don't know the answer to that. But that's all I got. Those are my thoughts on this big move with the new PlayStation Plus announcement. Let me know what you guys think about all of my thoughts. Any thoughts you have on Game Pass and PlayStation Plus down in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And again, I appreciate you supporting the show. Again, the best way you can support the show is drop a comment and rate the show, give us a like, all that good stuff. Helps with the algorithms. It's much appreciated. And that'll do it for this week. So I'll see you guys next week. Until next time, I'm Bonfire, and I will see you online.